There we go. I think that slowed down a little bit now, so we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Friday of the 2020 Halifax Small Business Week. Very much appreciate you all being here, although, as I'm sure many of you would agree, and I'm sure Michael would agree, every week should be Small Business Week as we look across Canada. I'm Patrick Sullivan, President and CEO of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, and your host today. A very big thank you to BDC as our presenting sponsor for, I'm sure Michael would correct me, call it BDC Small Business Week, which I think is probably the accurate representation, for putting on another great Small Business Week locally and right across the country. And thank you to Scotiabank, our promotion partner for this event, for making this our largest webinar ever. So we're really happy about that. Well, it's certainly been an interesting year. Entrepreneurs have stepped up to switch their offerings to match changing consumer habits. We're seeing businesses move entirely online. We're seeing many people change their entire business models. Our entrepreneurs are proving once again that they have a significant ability to adapt. This week is dedicated to celebrating the successes and recognizing the challenges of small business. Let's take the time to understand what's changed for Canadian businesses, how we can support them moving forward, and how we can build for the future. Thank you very much to everyone who submitted questions for our presenter. When we get to the Q&A, please feel free to type any other questions into the chat box. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen, the chat box or the Q&A. So enter your questions there. If you do enter your questions, I'm just going to open up those boxes here. If you do enter them in chat, you should address them to panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your question, so that as other people may want to chime in the chat. And in the Q&A, you can certainly just answer your question there. And as questions are answered, we'll remove them from the Q&A. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Michael Denham. Michael is President and CEO of BDC, the Bank for Canadian Entrepreneurs. He leads a team of over 2,400 people across Canada who work every day to help entrepreneurs by providing the guidance and financial support they need to build resilient, growing businesses. A seasoned business leader with more than 30 years of senior management experience, Mr. Denham held senior roles at McKinsey, Bombardier, Accenture, and Aquaterra before joining BDC. He is a strong supporter and promoter of small and medium-sized businesses and the impact that they make every day to our economy and prosperity. Welcome, Michael, and thank you very much for joining us. I think you're in Montreal today.
I am, Patrick, and it's good. This is the second session you and I have had this week, so it's good to see you again.
Yes.
As I said before, I do just want to call out the fact that, especially since March, Patrick, your chamber really has played such a critical role, because entrepreneurs need chances to get together, to learn, to connect, etc. And it's frankly been hard for a lot of us to do that since then. But I must say, from all I hear about your leadership and the work of the chamber, you continue to provide that glue, which is just so important right now. So I just want to comment and compliment you for the role that you and your colleagues continue to play.
Well, thank you. Thank you. But as you know, and I'm sure you would say about BDC, it's a team effort here at the Halifax Chamber as well. So there's lots of folks who are contributing every day to ensure that we're getting the information out that we need to get out to our members. I apologize for everybody. I know I look like I'm looking away, but I'm actually looking directly at Michael as I look on another screen. So the perils, I suppose, of having two computers, a laptop, and a screen. This pandemic has been going on now for, it seems like an eternity, but I think we're at kind of 8 or 9 months now. BDC was called to the forefront of a lot of the financial relief efforts for small businesses as things began to unfold. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Michael?
Sure, Patrick, I'm happy to. And again, over the course of this discussion, folks may have questions, which I hope they ask, but issues where they want to spend more time. And my colleagues, Russell Hobson and Danny Connors, who are both based in Halifax, are on this call. So I encourage folks to follow up with them directly if there are issues. But Patrick, so to answer you, kind of go back in time to mid-March. And it was March the 12th and March the 13th, basically the economy shut down. And the first response on the part of the federal government was to recapitalize both EDC, Export Development Canada, and ourselves. And we were given more capital so as to be able to kind of lend more and provide some credit to help companies weather the storm. Big surprise, there was a huge surge in demand for what we do. So we literally, over the course of, I think, the last week in March, first week in April, we had more requests, more applications for loans than we tend to get in a year.
Wow.
So we did our best to simplify things, streamline things, ease up on the due diligence. We moved people all over the place in order to process that. And we did our best. I think in some cases, we were certainly slower than I wanted us to be, slower than a lot of our clients wanted to be, but we kind of did our best to move through that massive amount of demand. And we got through it relatively quickly. Now, since then, I know the provincial government has put in place a lot of very, very productive measures. And federally, since then, we've seen a number of programs come out that are a mix of grants and interest-free loans. And obviously, these are the first places that all entrepreneurs should go. The CEBA program is one example, the wage subsidy program, the rent relief program, which was just upgraded recently. So now there's a whole array of programming coming out of both the province and Ottawa that is kind of grant and interest-free loan based. That should be the first port of call for entrepreneurs. But we continue to provide solutions in terms of credit. Any tech folks on the phone would know that we're a big VC investor and Canada's largest VC investor. And we also have an advisory services group, Patrick, and we've re-vectored that to provide more kind of free of charge, kind of telephone-based advice to help entrepreneurs tackle their specific issues. So we continue to do that. Remain extremely busy as the solution for companies that are looking for equity investment advice or credit.
So I guess things have slowed down from those couple of weeks, but still significant activity. Our people are looking for cash. Is that and the cash that you're providing, is it sort of long-term cash, short-term cash, or is it a mix of both? How do they get access to that?
Yeah. So from our perspective, and again, BDC.ca has all the details. Again, we're a lender, so we put in place a number of very specific solutions for what entrepreneurs need right now, and what they need right now is working capital. So through our online lending platform, on an entirely kind of self-service basis, entrepreneurs can apply for and get loans up to $100,000, and we've kind of resequenced the payments on that loan to soften the blow in the immediate term. And again, up to $2 million through our business centers, so through Danny's team and Russell's team, entrepreneurs can get up to $2 million of loans for working capital. Again, and we've softened the terms and conditions to minimize the amount of payments required in the first period of time. And then on top of that, we continue to offer loans for kind of real estate, equipment, R&D, et cetera.
So the BCAP loan, was that a loan that was available pre-COVID, or is that a loan that was only available since COVID?
So BCAP is BCAP for those that don't know what the acronym means. It's the Business Credit Availability Program. That's a very good question, Patrick. So we put in place a program with all the chartered banks and financial institutions in the country. And the notion was, since these organizations know you and have this massive reach across the distribution across the whole country, it would make sense to take advantage of that network to connect with entrepreneurs as quickly and as smoothly as possible. The challenge was to make sure that these chartered banks and financial institutions take a little bit more risk than they're accustomed to, given the uncertainty and kind of choppiness in today's economy. So with EDC, BDC is providing support to the chartered banks in terms of, and other FIs, in terms of loan guarantees and credit support, so that we take 80% of the risk, the banks take 20%, and the hope is through that they see a way to extend credit to clients that otherwise wouldn't receive credit or wouldn't receive the same amount. And that's been in place now for a few months. So that program is accessible through the banks. So if people listening have an interest in learning more, they should go to their financial institution, because that's how the relationship works, and it's through these institutions that the funds are distributed. But we're there to provide the guarantee to make it a little bit easier for the banks to get comfortable with the credit.
And I think you had said the other day when we chatted that obviously there's been an impact on people's P&Ls, as the months have unfolded. But if they were a relatively good credit risk before the pandemic, then it's likely that they would qualify, even though they may be suffering at this point a little bit.
That's the intent. Exactly.
Okay, great. So are you hearing any stories from folks that are benefiting or pivoting or innovating? I'm getting to get a little tired of pivoting. I think everybody pivoted in the first few months. Now I think it's just a normal course of business. You need to change your business often throughout whatever the business life is. But some of that innovation, so that people can continue to grow their businesses in the wake of what we're seeing.
Yeah, there's certain words that I think you're right, Pat. We need to avoid using. That is one. I also think the term "new normal" is a term that we should avoid using as well. And I bet you have a long list of other terms like that we shouldn't use. They become meaningless and a bit hackneyed. But I bet you we can't. But if we were to go around the virtual table for this call, I think we'd hear dozens of great stories of how entrepreneurs have found ways to kind of change aspects of their business to take advantage of revenue opportunities that weren't there before. And a lot of companies have been hit hard. A lot of companies have had their kind of markets kind of dry up, had a difficulty to connect with their pre-existing consumers. They have had to get creative. They had no choice but to get creative and to get innovative. And I think Ironworks Distillery is a company that many folks would know. And they've done a very good job. They have a great brand. They have an unbelievable asset. And they found a way to take advantage of that and evolve into the sanitizer and PPE business, shift from a business model which was largely done on premise towards kind of delivery, takeout, distribution, et cetera. And they found a way to kind of go get their market and go get their customers rather than waiting for folks to come to them. And again, they did it very well. They worked very hard. They're pulling it off. And there are many other examples that I think we'd all know of entrepreneurs that have been able to find opportunities that weren't there before as a way to bring the revenues in during this what for a lot of folks is a very difficult period of time.
Well, I can tell you in those dark days of April, getting a delivery from Ironworks Distillery and topping up my gin and tonic was a welcome.
That's right. It is Friday. It is Friday after all, right?
It is Friday today. It is Friday today for sure, and I'm sure it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Your team has recently done a series of studies or some research to look at some of this, and I think, can you tell us a little bit about some of that research, and maybe we can ask Russell or Danny to even put up the link or Melanie in the chat, and everyone will be able to see that.
Yes, and so let me start with a bit of a story about Small Business Week that Patrick, you mentioned, and as you say, every week should be Small Business Week, and certainly for us, every week is Small Business Week. But this is the week the country reflects on and frankly celebrates small business and the resilience, the innovation, the creativity, the contribution that entrepreneurs make to Canada. And the event started back in 1977. We hosted it a little bit of a kind of quarter of the desk type of thing. In the Fraser Valley in BC. And it's taken off ever since. So this week, for example, I think we're involved in or supporting or hosting probably in excess of 150 events across the country. And I know you've been extremely busy this week as well in the same light, which I think is just terrific. But what we do every year, just to provide some materials for the country to reflect on as part of the dialogue around entrepreneurship, is we do some research. And this year, given all that we're going through, we decided to keep it very simple. And we surveyed in excess of 1,000 entrepreneurs. And we just asked a very simple question. What are your priorities right now? And what emerged, Patrick, and I'll just elaborate a little bit now, but there's much more detail in the research itself. What emerges is 5 priorities that entrepreneurs indicate they are addressing right now. And the first one, I think these will all resonate to the entrepreneurs on the call. The first one is getting their finances in order. And it's been so up and down and intense since March that a lot of balance sheets aren't healthy. There's too much debt, AP's out of whack, receivables are out of whack, deferred revenues are out of whack. And there's a need to look ahead to the type of markets entrepreneurs expect and get the balance sheet set up to do that. And secondly, there is a continued need to get the expense line down to make sure companies have as much flexibility in the months ahead. So getting the finances in order has been job number one. Job number two relates to technology and investing in technology. And a lot of entrepreneurs were forced to kind of shed some employees, shed some expenses to address the fact that revenues were down. What they've concluded is rather than just build back as they were, to use that Joe Biden term, kind of build back better, what they are trying to do is kind of build back better and make investments in technology, software, equipment, robotics, what have you, so that when the resources do come back, they're bringing back just the right level of resource to have the leanest, most focused operation as possible. The third priority is the recognition that telework, to use that term, is a reality. And I don't advocate, certainly for BDC, I don't advocate going back to 5 days a week away from the office. I think we've all proven we can do that. We're productive, we're getting things done, we're meeting our objectives away from work. I'm not suggesting, given that, we go back to the office 5 days a week, but I do think each company will find the balance, but there's going to be a need for a hybrid where your employees see the benefits of not commuting all the time. We all see the benefits in terms of productivity, working away from the office, but they're important kind of cultural connection, frankly, fun aspects that involve getting together. So there'll be a need for a hybrid, but the core point is that this idea of kind of teleworking and working remotely is here to stay, and companies need to equip themselves for that. Fourth is online sales. And what's staggering, Patrick, is you kind of look at some of the stats, and literally half of Canadian companies don't have a website. There are 500,000 Canadian companies that don't have a website. The other stat that I find interesting is a staggeringly high number of Canadians may have made their first online purchase since March. So, and they've liked it and they've gone back for more. So I think Canada's always been a bit of a laggard with respect to how digital we are and with respect to how much e-commerce we do. I think all that's changing for good. So companies do need to make sure they have an online presence, kind of stood up, they have the technology, but as important, they need to have the strategy and marketing so that they find a way to both stand out from the crowd, but also make sure they keep their existing relationships with their current customers. And the last point is for a subset of entrepreneurs, they are focused on growth. For many sectors, they're back to kind of where they were before March. Life feels kind of relatively normal. And as a result, they're looking to invest in buildings, equipment, M&A, R&D, et cetera. And that's become a priority for a lot of entrepreneurs. So very long answer to your question, but I think it's pretty exciting stuff. And again, it's available in more detail through bdc.ca.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. I mean, I'm not surprised by any of that. I think I was surprised by one, almost a half of companies don't have a website. But it also speaks to, I mean, we're working on a project now for our members to help them to digitize. And we're doing it, for anybody who's listening, we're doing it, you can do it for free. It's a free offer and you can become a more digital business if you'd like to learn more about that. I'm hoping that one of our folks can put up a link to the program that we're doing with Simplicast. But anyway, I find it surprising that there are businesses like that. I just had a meeting with ACOA, who I think you know, moments before we started this conversation, and they said that one of their major goals is to help organizations to digitize or to improve their technology skills as we move forward. I'm kind of curious. I know we have some questions here. I'm going to go down this whole telework thing. You've got 2,400 employees. Many of them, I suspect, did work from home, and some of them, I suspect, are probably still working from home as you have operations across the country. We've had to provide a lot of support for our employees as they do that. So, we've got some folks, most of our folks are now back in the office, but, we have parents whose kids are now being tested for COVID and have to isolate them for 3 days, before they get the test and then 2 days after. How are you accommodating whether it's parents or whether it's folks who are dealing with COVID, of a relative, or how do you do that in a large organization?
Yeah. So we so from mid-March, everybody went home, and so I had a very stressful Monday when everybody kind of woke up. Oh, well, all this disaster recovery, all this preparation isn't going to work, and thank God it did. So literally 9 o'clock Monday, we had everybody basically working from home, connecting in. And really since that first Monday, we've been productive. Now things have changed. So the way it works now is all of our business centers, we have about 120 across the country, are open except for those in Ontario and Quebec. And certainly for me, as you can tell behind me, I'm working at home. We're not going to be opening our head office in Montreal probably until earliest January, and it may get pushed out beyond then. So, and Russell and Danny can probably relate to this. Even in business centers we've opened, like on average, the max we allow is 25% occupancy, but we're probably averaging about 5% across the country. So it's a great option and outlet for folks that need the chance to kind of get into the business center just to work from there. But most folks are choosing to continue to work remotely. And what we've done, to your question, is, and again, we have a little bit more, given our size, kind of slack in our system than a lot of entrepreneurs would. But we have, again, provided financial support to make sure that people can equip themselves to be productive at home, ergonomics, sound capability, etc. Our teams are in very close touch with each other, and we all know at some point in time we're going to need help from our teammates. Our kids are going to come home. We're going to have a sick family member to attend to. And our priority has always been for people to attend to that part of their lives as a top priority because it needs to be. And the teams have basically kind of filled the slack and fill in behind them. And that's just a part of our culture, part of how we work. And it's been helpful so that I just want to make sure that people don't endure the massive amount of stress that would be involved in working as one normally does while dealing with 3, 4, 5-year-olds at home all the time, because that's just not doable. So teams have kicked in to pick up the workload, and so far it's served us well.
That's great. Well, that's really good to hear. There's certainly enough stress for all of us out there. Now, I'm perhaps saying that because I watched the first 45 minutes of the debate last night, and then I couldn't sleep after that. But anyway, maybe that was my personal stress problem. How would you describe entrepreneurs and perhaps the impact of COVID-19 in Nova Scotia or the Atlantic region compared to some of the other folks that you're speaking to across the country?
So what we see thematically across the country is that every region kind of has the same set of attributes, in the sense that there are some industries and sectors which have come back, and in some cases are in a better place than they were in February. So think of food processing, for example, most tech subsectors, anything to do with the kind of health system and health supply. But other sectors, most notably accommodation, travel, airline related, are continuing to deal with all sorts of uncertainty and difficulty. And that's kind of the story across the country. Now, I'll just look at some of my notes so I get the facts right. In Nova Scotia, for example, the economy is back to about 85% of where it was, and that's ahead of the national average of 79%. You've got back about 80% of the jobs that were lost versus a national average of 76%. Construction is recovering nicely. Forestry is in a good place. And I must say, with the Atlantic bubble, and just the extent to which, Patrick, you and your fellow citizens are supporting the public health guidelines, it feels as though you're in a much better place for a smoother recovery than other parts of the country. I recognize it's difficult for people now to come into the Atlantic provinces, but just the fact that your case count remains low and you're so careful, I think is going to serve you well as it relates to sectors like retail, et cetera, coming back. But the effect of the tourist challenge is hard on hotels. It's been hard on retail. So we kind of see Nova Scotia in more or less the same place as other regions. We're slightly more optimistic about the recovery because of the public health situation. But things move so quickly that things change so quickly. But overall, for Canada, we think that the Canadian GDP, as most economists do, by the way, will get back to where it was sometime late 2022, early 2023. So there's going to be some choppiness and some uncertainty in the months ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're hearing as well. I mean, certainly there are businesses that are doing well during the pandemic. I mean, if we think of food, we think of grocery, we think of folks that have take-home products. It's not been as bumpy a ride for those organizations. Perhaps ramping up has been the bumpy ride, but certainly for tourism, hospitality, food service, the service economy, it's still a tough ride, and it'll likely be a bit of a tough ride.
One interesting data point on that is when the crisis started, BDC and all banks offered a deferral of principal payments on loans for, depending on the situation, 3 to 6 months. So we're at that point in time now where we're working with their clients to get them back onto their original payment timing. And what's interesting is that I think something like 95, 96% of our clients have been able to make that switch, which tells me they have enough cash and enough confidence in their cash flows. Because otherwise we would have talked to them about a kind of different set of arrangements that we would support. So that is an encouraging data point about the prospects that entrepreneurs see for their businesses in the months ahead.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there has been money flowing as well from particularly the federal government. I mean, the province a little bit, but in conversations recently, the CEBA, the Canadian Emergency Business Account, I think has granted or provided almost $500 million just to Nova Scotia. So that is businesses that have received that money. $10,000 of that is a grant. I suspect many of those businesses will take advantage of the second tranche, which is the $20,000, of which 10 is a grant. So hopefully, again, that puts cash in people's pockets. I do want to remind people they can put comments in the chat, or questions in the chat, or the Q&A, or as Paul has done, actually advertise in the chat for his business. So a creative use of marketing. What do you think, Michael, are some of the few critical steps businesses need to do to sustain their business through COVID-19 or through what continues to be the pandemic?
So I talked about the priorities from the research earlier, Patrick. The point I'd add now is that the advice we offer really depends on the situation the company faces. And as you just mentioned, there are some companies, frankly, a lot of companies that are in markets that actually have pretty good prospects right now where demand is quite good. So for them, we do advise them to take advantage of the opportunity and find ways to invest and grow. So whether it's expanding your capacity in a building, whether it's equipment, whether it's opening up new export markets, whether it's R&D, there are lots of very traditional, exciting growth levers that are there, and they should be pulled because the situation in those industries makes them appropriate. However, the second set of advice, though, for companies that are in sectors that are going to face challenges in the months ahead. Again, thinking of accommodation as an example. And there, the big challenge is to take advantage of every single opportunity that exists locally, provincially, federally to provide support. Patrick, you mentioned CEBA. CEBA is a no-brainer for every company that is eligible. The wage subsidy, I think, has done a great job allowing folks to kind of maintain their teams. The rent relief was recently upgraded. It seems like it's more accessible now. All those programs are so key for companies in these sectors. And at the same time, and again, there's no silver bullet here, I'm afraid. You just have to be very, very rigorous in terms of looking at your cash flows, cash in, cash out, look ahead. And what's important is to be very honest with yourself so that you can kind of spot issues of stress well before you arrive there. And as a result, you'll have some time to deal with them, to work with your banks, to work with others, to kind of find a way through. But you need to be ahead of those points of stress because trying to fix situations while you're enduring that stress is just that much harder. So we encourage everybody to be really rigorous and as forward-looking as they possibly can in terms of their cash flow planning and cash flow models.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a really good point. I mean, you mentioned a number of programs there. We've had a bit of a debate in Nova Scotia this week on a program that was announced. It is for large tourism operators, and large tourism operators need money too. So I'm glad that this program is available. But you really do need to think of all of the options, if you will, and that includes CEBA, and that includes the wage subsidy, and that includes, whether it's a small business grant that occurred a few months ago, or what's going to happen, because it's my hope that the federal government will still provide something for the tourism and hospitality sector. What's going to happen in the future. So you really need to look at every one of those products, and I think if you can take advantage of them, and they do provide you with some of that cash to weather the future, I think that's really, really important. People should not be looking at one program in isolation and saying this doesn't fit. You need to look at all of the programs and take advantage of everything that you can. What are some of the, and you just alluded to this, I mean, there are some businesses that are growing. We need to look at other opportunities. Are there small business trends that you're expecting to see as we move? I've got written down here the new normal, but I'm afraid to say it now that you mentioned it.
That's
right. Are there new business trends that we should be looking at?
I mentioned e-commerce. I thought it was great, by the way, Patrick, the service you're providing to your members and local businesses to provide them the kind of training and support they need to make the move. So that's one. The second trend that I think we all need to be cognizant of is that we don't think that it's going to take a while for consumer spending to get back to where it was. I think there've been a kind of buildup in terms of household savings rates. I think as long as individuals remain uncertain, individuals are going to be a little bit disinclined to spend. So I think consumer spending is going to be dampened in the months ahead. And the third thing that I suspect is happening real time and rapidly within the Atlantic bubble is a reworking of supply chains. And we kind of go back over the past couple of decades, the kind of narrative, the theme was around kind of hyper efficient, very leaned out global supply chains. Low cost sourcing, lack of redundancy, et cetera. And I think what we've learned recently for both geopolitical, frankly, and pandemic reasons is that not having redundancy, having a model which is purely around efficiency represents some risk, and a lot of risk to supply chains that we hadn't really thought of properly. So we do see change right now in a trend towards more localization of supply chains. And that type of trend tends to be good news for local, smaller businesses. So you see it in food already, you see it in grocery. I know certainly, perhaps in Nova Scotia, but certainly Newfoundland and Labrador, you see it around kind of PPE and the healthcare supply chain. So I think that's a trend that is just going to kind of quietly work its way through within key industries. But again, that does typically mean opportunities for SMEs and for entrepreneurs.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, as I speak to people, I was speaking to someone last night who's in the construction industry, and they were talking about the shortages that they're now experiencing, both for appliances. He does a lot of kitchens and even bathrooms and toilet seats, all of these kinds of things. The supply chain has definitely been interrupted, whether it's to the Far East or wherever. So his advice at that point was to say, if it's not available, if your product is not available, you need to shift. You need to move on to something else. Don't wait, because you may never get it. Even as local an example as this is dog food. I have a puppy trying to get some of the dog food. Surprisingly, and I didn't know this, some of the pet food was made in China. Mm-hmm. And I now have a local pet food manufacturer only 3 doors up from me here at the Chamber of Commerce. So I'm thinking I should be switching to my local pet food supplier much more than I should be trying to order pet food from China. Not, I'm sure they make very good pet food, but the localization, I think, of some of the supply chain has really changed. Yeah. You had mentioned when we were on the phone the other day about the number of people that had ordered, I think, for the first time from an e-commerce site, which I think kind of staggered me, because I thought everybody had ordered from an e-commerce site, but maybe I'm the anomaly. You talked a little bit about some of the trends, but what are you seeing in terms of consumer behavior, and how has the pandemic changed how consumers interact a little bit with some of those small businesses?
Yeah, this is going to be the big shift. The Canadians buying online, and the interesting angle is especially for local businesses and the pet food store, Patrick, 3 doors down from you, is that part of this, from the SME perspective, part of this shift is worrisome, because you may say to yourself, wow, this means that the customers used to come to my store are going to start buying from Amazon and Walmart and what have you online. And that's true in part. But the other thing that's true is that especially retailers should take advantage of this kind of loyalty and relationship they have with their current customers that come in to visit, and evolve that towards an online relationship. So it's a very effective way, and put in place the delivery, the connectivity required. So it is a way to, there are lots of ways to kind of lock in, if you will, or retain the loyalty and repeat business of your current customers through online. And then with the right online presence, you also have the benefit of expanding your reach and getting into new markets. So there's both a risk associated with it because of the kind of big behemoths, but at the same time, there are lots of opportunities as well. But I do think we all need to get our mind wrapped around the fact that increasingly Canada is catching up to other countries in the world, and more things will be bought online like this.
Well, and I think it's not only tangible items, I think it's services as well.
Yep.
Speaking to a number of our members who've said that as a consultant, let's say, won't pick a particular industry, they used to have trouble getting into the Ontario or the Western market. Now, frankly, we're all on Zoom. Nobody cares where you're from anymore. And they've actually picked up some significant business by dealing with organizations in Ontario or in Western Canada. So I think even on, in the service industry, that opportunity to participate electronically, I think is going to drive a lot more change. Maybe it will mean that more people will move from Montreal or from Toronto to Nova Scotia, and ultimately conduct their workday in Montreal or Toronto from Chester or from Liverpool along the ocean.
Was a personal example of that front, but I sit on was the chair and sit on the board of the kids' school here in Montreal, and we needed to kind of refresh our strategy. And historically, we would have talked to a bunch of kind of local consulting firms, et cetera, to get their help. But to your point, we ended up choosing this unbelievably experienced, brilliant consulting firm from Melbourne, Australia.
Wow.
And they were delivering their services and their advice just in the same way that any local firm would, because it's all Zoom. Granted, they had to meet with us at kind of 3 a.m. Melbourne time, but it was a great way for us to access the best in the world on this topic. And this firm all of a sudden was able to kind of rapidly build itself into a global business rather than just local one. So there'll be thousands of examples like that for clients to benefit, for entrepreneurs to benefit, because of the definition of your customer base is now changing, to your point.
Well, I think, and we've kind of got a bit of a theme here with your answer to along this vein. Often I think, in a difficult time, so a pandemic, obviously a very difficult time, people think it's time to kind of, move inside and sort of slow their growth or stop their growth. But it actually may be exactly the opposite. It may be an opportunity for growth. It may be an opportunity to look to a new market and perhaps do it in an electronic way. You don't have to go there. You can do it more easily. You may be able to expand your business. Digitization, is obviously it's an important time to do that. So it does seem to me, and maybe I'm just the eternal optimist, that we shouldn't be looking at the glass half full. And clearly there are industries impacted significantly, but we need to look at, are there new markets we can expand to? Are there new products we should be developing? Anyway, it's a rant. Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking for you to comment.
Yeah, well, so let me comment. This research we did that I mentioned, I think 21% of the companies we talked to kind of plan to do nothing in response to what we're going through. And a lot of those companies just really want life to get back to the way it was. And I read that, I say, oh no, please don't be true. because there are so many, there's the world, things are going to change, but even more importantly, if each and every one of us looks at our business right now, and some of the changes that we've been forced to make have made us better, made us faster, have made us reach a new set of customers, have made us work together differently, more productively. So you want to make sure you preserve all the things that we didn't choose to do, we're forced to do, but have made us better as leaders and made our businesses better. And we've got to make sure we lock in those things and build on it in the months ahead. So the idea of kind of doing nothing, the idea of just hoping kind of things get back to the way they were, I think ignores the fact that all of us have found ways to improve what we do since March, and we've got to lock all those changes in and not let ourselves go back to the way we were.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree with you. You talked a little bit about BDC and what you're doing for your employees. What do you think employees should be expecting from their employers now, and vice versa, as we move forward?
So I think employees need to recognize that there's a two-part answer to the question. I think employees themselves need to recognize that given the challenges we're living within, given the constraints that affect so many businesses, employees need to realize they need to be productive, and they need to kind of work and deliver. The flip side to your question, though, I think employers need to recognize there are two or three things that have to be tackled. First is, under no circumstances can folks sacrifice or underinvest in the safety of their people. A, it's wrong. B, you're going to lose your people if they don't feel as though the work environment you've set up is safe. So that is a absolute essential. Second, I think employers do need to show honesty and transparency in terms of, we're kind of all in this together. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I need you to do, so that together we can make sure a business is sustainable and moves forward. And third, I think the employer needs to be flexible and recognize that life is hard for a lot of people right now. Surprises happen. Kids get sent home from school. Family members need support, and you just got to find a way to have enough flexibility to kind of deal with that. Because if you can't, again, I worry that you're going to lose your employees, and you spend so much time kind of building up your teams, locking in your culture, that you just want to make sure that, especially in the months ahead, you keep those folks close to you and keep them engaged. Yeah,
absolutely. Russell has put up the research study, so thank you for that. That's in the chat function with a hyperlink there for folks. But at BDC.ca, your team has compiled a library of tools and resources to help businesses overcome the crisis. If you had to pick perhaps three, what are they, and what should small businesses do or where should they check them out?
Yeah. So if you go to BDC.ca under tools and articles, there actually is a ton of stuff. And part of our mandate, frankly, is not just to lend to and invest in small businesses, but it's to help make business leaders better. And one of the ways we do that is just through all this information we make available on BDC.ca. So the two things, Patrick, that get to some of the themes you and I have been talking about that do seem to be most in demand right now is one, e-commerce and online, and investing in technology. There's a whole host of information there for novices versus more advanced entrepreneurs. And then the second are tools and techniques and ways to model and manage your cash flows and your financial plans. And there are kind of templates, spreadsheets, etc. There's some gamification solutions to make the learning more intuitive that are there, but it's really the digitization online and the cash flow management, financial planning that are the two most tapped into parts of BDC.ca.
That's great. Okay, gamification, my favorite term. That sounds great. I mean, we're obviously hoping another pandemic doesn't happen, at least until we're finished this one. But you know, what should a business do? What should be the first thing a business do, or how do they plan? Can you plan for this kind of, if you will, sort of that black swan event that seems to have happened?
I mean, there's a limit to what you can plan for. Now, I do think that what we've been through so far has been instructive for all of us. We actually know now what happens to our business when lockdowns take place, when demand falls off a cliff. So we have experienced it, so we know what to prepare for. So I think, Patrick, that we can't get too focused on kind of future black swan events. I think we need to be cognizant about the public health situation. We need to recognize that certainly our world here in Quebec, where we have our zone rouge, as we say, things aren't quite locked down, but feel close. We need to be prepared for brief periods of time where that happens. But again, we need to kind of look forward, plan accordingly, but just recognize that there's a need to get those plans built around certain scenarios and make sure that if these scenarios kick in, you know what to do.
Right. So if you could kind of boil this all down to one piece of advice for business owners, the business owners that are listening to us, what should they do next, or what would you say?
Well, what I'd say, to me, what I'd say, and most people don't need me to say this because they're wired that way, is just stay resilient. And especially in Atlantic Canada, Nova Scotia, entrepreneurs are resilient because there have been so many curveballs that have come over the course of the years. And this is a time that tests our resilience. We're going to get through it. We're not quite sure when and how long it's going to take, but we know we're going to get through it. And just kind of stay positive, stay resilient, take advantage of your networks, take advantage of the Chamber of Commerce and other groups that bring people together, work together, but together and being resilient, we'll get through it. And it's just a question of time.
Okay. I do have a couple of questions here from some of the folks on the line, so I'm just going to get those out. Do you feel that wage subsidies, the federal wage subsidies, could run out, or what happens when federal wage subsidies run out?
You know, that's a good question. I can't comment. I don't know. I have no view as to whether the policies will be continued. They've been continued thus far. I think the government will continue to look at the kind of situation and make the call. So I can't comment, don't want to comment on the longevity of these programs. So I just got to kind of plead the fifth on this one, if you don't mind, Patrick.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I think my answer will be, I don't think they'll run out until the need no longer exists. I mean, I think the federal government has recognized that we are in a unique time, and they have, to some extent, and we're unbiased, so I'm going to say all parties have provided a huge amount of funding for businesses and individuals right across the country. So, I think they clearly recognize that we're in a special time, and my hope is that they will continue to recognize that. The federal government also announced, I think, some dollars recently for African Canadian initiatives. Are you aware of that, and is that something you're participating in, or something that you're thinking about at BDC?
Yeah, no question. So part of our mandate as BDC is to make sure we do our best so that all Canadian entrepreneurs have access to the financing they need. And if you look historically, there are some groups that just empirically, statistically, have been disadvantaged. So women entrepreneurs, for example, Indigenous entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, and Black entrepreneurs. And we've been putting in place kind of programs and solutions for those groups in the past few years, as have many others. So I've signed on to the Black North Initiative, which the person asking the question is probably aware of, which is a commitment that I and a number of other CEOs made with respect to creating a more diverse and inclusive environment as it relates to Black Canadians. But BDC, we went beyond that and also committed to put in place programs to facilitate and ease the access to financing, both equity financing and borrowing for Black entrepreneurs. So the announcement the government made, we're part of. We're looking to put in place more explicit programs with grassroots groups that support Black entrepreneurs and work alongside them on the adjudication and credit process to take advantage of their relationships to get more credit moving. So I think the government initiative that was announced certainly heads in the right direction. We'll look to add and do even more on top of that in the weeks ahead. So stay tuned. It's a priority for us.
Oh, that's great. Okay, that's great to hear. That's great. I know we have some questions on insurance that I don't think we're going to ask Michael, but I think what this indicates is we need to get somebody who knows all about insurance onto a webinar, as there are a lot of changes happening in that industry right now. So we'll work to do that and do that in the next couple of months. So thank you very much for the question. I see Bernadette has a specific question we were just talking about African Canadian opportunities. So is there someone in particular in Halifax that she can speak to? Would that be Russell or Danny or?
So Bernadette, I would encourage you to reach out to Russell. The work we're doing so far is largely been driven by folks working with me at our head office. But what I encourage you to do is talk to Russell, explain what what's on your mind, and then I'll work with Russell to make sure that we get the right perspective back to you. Okay,
great. And Bernadette works with the Decade for Persons of African Descent. I think that's right, the DPAD.
Right.
So she does have a large group of folks that she works with, and so that would be
terrific. That's good.
So Bernadette, you know how to get me, so I can put you in touch with Russell directly. Oh, although Russell has already put up his email, so now you know how to get a hold of Russell directly as well. So I think we'll probably wrap it up there, Michael. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us here in Halifax and in Nova Scotia that we should be thinking about as we move forward?
I just want to thank you, Patrick. Thank you and the team for inviting me. I hope everybody had a great small business week. And again, keep working together, stay in touch, work with the Chamber. We're here for those that want to talk to us. I just want to wish everybody success in the weeks and months ahead.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much. We did have a live in-person event last night with approximately 50 people at the Hollis Hotel, where people were able to socialize, physically distance, and very safe. So it was great to actually see people out and enjoying their time as they met other folks. But thank you very much, Michael. Really appreciate your time today. And of course, you were gracious enough to give us time previously in the week. So thank you very much for that. Small Business Week is almost over, but our support for small business isn't restricted to 1 week, given that over 83% of our over 1,700 members are small businesses in Nova Scotia. So let's all of us on the line today support local businesses however we can, whether it's online shopping, whether it's curbside pickup, whether it's dining out, whether it's actually going into that establishment and shopping around in what is probably one of the safest places in the world right now in Nova Scotia. This webinar will be recorded and will be available to all attendees shortly on YouTube. Thank you very much, Michael. Look forward to talking to you again and seeing you in person. And have a great day, everyone. Thanks very much. Thanks.